있는 조선 글씨는 조선 임군 세종이 서역 1443년에 대궐안에 정음국을 열고 여러 학자로 더불어 연구하신 끝에 온전히 과학적으로.
During the Japanese occupation, the Joseon Language Society tried to preserve and protect Hangul from the Japanese government's regulations. They faced a lot of adversity, such as the members getting arrested. However, they kept working on the dictionaries and they were able to compile the Joseon Language Great Dictionary, thereby respreading the knowledge of the Korean language after independence. Until 1910, Korea was an independent country called the Korean Empire. The educational quality was severely low back then, which resulted in lots of Korean people not knowing how to read and write in Hangul. In order to decrease the illiteracy rate, 𝗘𝗺 and 𝗘𝗺 wrote the Independence Times with the help of the government, so that more people would start to read in Hangul. Then, 𝗘𝗺 created the Language Research Society, which was renamed as the Joseon Language Society later on. 𝗘𝗺 was a person who studied Korean linguistics. As he believed that language can empower the country, he was one of the founders of the Language Research Society. 𝗘𝗺's study of Korean language began with the willingness to develop national spirit and culture. His goal was to eventually set standards and unify Korean grammar and to choose and finalize the standard language in order to spread the knowledge of Hangul and to decrease the illiteracy rate. He believed that a low illiteracy rate would make the Korean Empire a more developed country. Korea was soon colonized by the Empire of Japan. This is referred to as the Japanese occupation of Korea. One of Japan's policies was the National Annihilation Plan. One critical impact was on communication. The Japanese government tried to get rid of Korea's culture. If Koreans were caught speaking Korean, they were severely punished. Students were only allowed to learn the Japanese language. In fact, over 200,000 Korean historical documents were burned by Japan. Furthermore, the Japanese government made a law saying that Korean people have to change their name into a Japanese name. This means that the identity of Korean people were also being manipulated by the Japanese Empire. After 𝗘𝗺 passed away on July 27, 1914, his students continued to research Hangul. They made the Joseon Language Research Society, and in 1929, 108 members made the Joseon Language Dictionary Compilation Association. In 1931, the Joseon Language Dictionary Compilation Association was renamed as the Joseon Language Society, with 𝗘𝗺 as the executive secretary. 1 year later, the Joseon Language Society published the first edition of the Hangul magazine, which included information about Hangul and what the Joseon Language Society was doing. The main goal of the Joseon Language Society was to eventually compile a proper Korean dictionary. In order to make the dictionary, the Joseon Language Society made documents and articles such as the Korean Language Grammar Unification Plan, Standard Language Review, and the Literacy of Foreign Language. The first two drafts of the dictionary, the Malmoy and the Joseon Language Dictionary, were both a key part to this. They both included definitions of words and information about Hangul.
아, 야, 여, 오, 요, 유,
Communication with people outside the Joseon Language Society was key to compiling this dictionary. The Joseon Language Society gathered information about dialects by going to different places and asking lots of different people about the dialects. They communicated with different people, from professional linguists to normal students, in order to have the dialects in great detail. In the short term, the Joseon Language Society had to face some obstacles. The Japanese government also had plans, as their goal was to make Korean people speak Japanese. Park Young-ok, a normal high school student, was found by Yasuda, a police officer, while talking to her friends in Korean on the train. After she was interrogated, the Japanese police found out that the person who gave the students courage and spirit was Jung Tae-jin, a member of the Joseon Language Society. Lots of members of the Joseon Language Society, including 𝗘𝗺, the executive leader, were arrested and sent to prison. When Japan lost World War II on August 15, 1945, Korea gained independence from Japan. All the arrested members were set free from prison. the Joseon Language Society got right back to work. They eventually found their lost documents such as the Malmoe and the Joseon Language Dictionary in the storage of Seoul Station. These documents were inside the storage for years after being lost. So, the Joseon Language Society kept on working on the Joseon Language Great Dictionary, and in 1957, the Joseon Language Society was finally finished with making the Joseon Language Great Dictionary. This was the biggest Korean dictionary at the time. It included lots of words and some extra information about the history of Hangul. For example, in the Joseon Language Great Dictionary, for each individual word, the definition and part of speech were included. For loanwords, the foreign language spelling and pronunciation were all included, and for some words, diagrams were included as well. Even though Korean people could speak whatever language they wanted after independence, there could have been confusion because there would not be unified grammar and official standard language, and because of the fact that not a lot of people knew how to read and write. However, thanks to the continuous effort to preserve, protect, and develop the Korean language, Koreans today are able to communicate freely without confusion. Even though inferences about the past cannot be exact, since Korea was occupied for 35 years, if there was no effort to preserve and protect the Korean language, Japan could have been successful in completely changing how Korean people speak, read, and write. This dictionary also met the goal of the Joseon Language Society, which was to unify the grammar and to set the standard language. The Joseon Language Great Dictionary is key to communication today because without the continuous effort to preserve the Korean language, it would be very difficult to bring the Korean language back and to teach the Korean language. The Joseon Language Society was renamed as the Hangul Society. After this, the Hangul Society continued on to develop Hangul by making Korean textbooks and revising the Hangul. Korean people have lots of pride about their own language. In fact, Hangul Day is celebrated in Korea to celebrate the ability to use the Korean language and to commemorate the creation of Hangul.
한국 사람들은 한국어를 사용하고 그리고 이제 한글을 사용하는 거죠. 이것이 이제 한국 사람들의 어떤 그 정체성, 또 개성, 뭐 또 특성, 그리고 다른 민족이나 다른 국민들과의 어떤 그 차별성 이런 것을 형성하는 아주 중요한 요소가 되는 거죠.
Korea is one of the few countries in the world which have their own language. Not only is Hangul a practical benefit, but it is also a matter of national spirit and culture. At the end, Joo Si-kyung and his students were able to meet their goals of developing the national spirit. As 𝗘𝗺𝗶𝗹 quotes, "Words are the spirit of the people." During the Japanese occupation, the Joseon Language Society tried to preserve and protect Hangul from the Japanese government's regulations. They faced a lot of adversity, such as the members getting arrested. However, they kept working on the dictionaries, and they were able to compile the Joseon Language Great Dictionary, thereby respreading the knowledge of the Korean language after independence. Joo Si-kyung once said that the success of a country depends on the ability of the people to speak their language. Through diligent work, the Joseon Language Society was able to secure the Korean language from the Japanese Empire. The Joseon Language Society created the Joseon Language Great Dictionary, which contributed to the ability of Korean people to communicate freely. The ability to communicate freely contributed to the national spirit and the development of Korea.
방탄소년단이라든가 또 뭐 기생충이라든가 이런 건 뭐냐 하면은 한국의 문화 수준이 이제 세계 수준이 됐다. 또는 앞으로 좀 더 희망적으로 얘기하면 세계 어떤 문화를 이끌어갈 수 있는 그런 수준까지도 됐다. 이렇게 얘기할 수도 있겠죠. 그런데 이런 그 한류의 바탕에는 이제 바로 이제 한국어 그리고 이제 한글이 있는 거죠.